every time a new technology comes into place, it ends up creating more jobs, not less, even though it always seems like it's about to put everybody out of work, and then it just opens up all these new avenues and the people with the talents flood in. Okay,
more
so
jobs, yes, but are the people able to go into those jobs?
No. So this is where I want people to remember, 2% of people can make that kind of change. 98% won't.
Trump's tariffs, markets crashing, AI's takeover, and the rise of Bitcoin. Now, there's one hidden force behind all three that could reshape the economy, and most investors aren't ready for it. And if you get this one thing wrong, you could be holding the wrong assets, working in the wrong job, and watching your wealth disappear. But if you get it right, you have the chance to be miles ahead of everyone. Today, I am sitting down with Tom Bilyeu. Tom's built a billion-dollar brand, interviewed over 600 top performers. He's a leading voice in the world through Impact Theory, his top 0.01% podcast, billion-view media company, and Tom teaches people how to master mindset, strategy, and adaptability, which are essential skills in the world that we're going into. So in this video, we're going to discuss Trump's tariffs. We're going to talk about the markets crashing. We're going to talk about AI's takeover and what that means over the next couple of years, and the rise of Bitcoin. Of course, what he thinks you're going to need to know to survive and thrive over the next 3 to 5 years. So let's just jump right in with Tom. So what would you say some mind shift that you could give to people that might be useful for them today?
The ultimate framework is really simple. You at all times need to know, and this is the big one, that people don't understand about themselves, which is that they trust their and they shouldn't. If people just run that all day, every day, they can have all the success that their emotional stability, their drive, and their level of intellect will allow. The big thing I would think people should look at right now, if you really want to understand part of the game they're playing and whether this is going to work, because of how much of the debt has to be refinanced, you've got to get the we are in a Cold War with very high potential for being a kinetic war with China. They can't control your manufacturing. So that has to change.
What do you see AI agents doing to disrupt sort of the world, and at what speed?
Less than 24 months away that you're seeing like this kind of blinding speed. You need to be at the edge of it, figuring out, how do I make this work? There's going to be many billion-dollar companies made by 1, 2, or 3 people. They get together, they deploy full AI orgs. All of a sudden, all of those employees that you would have historically had, they just go away.
All right, Tom, in one of your latest videos, you've been talking a lot about tariffs and Trump, and you called the tariff plan a global financial earthquake. Obviously, we've seen markets crashing. Seems like it's heating up with the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
A lot of people are on edge about this. Now, you've been interviewing a lot of people. I know macro thinkers that I know, like Raoul Pal, Ray Dalio, talking about the economic chaos that's happening. So what do you think investors should be paying attention to or doing right now?
That there's absolutely no way they know what's happening. And boy, do I warn people against being day traders. So I would have people asking one question: what do you do in times of uncertainty? At this point, it's probably too late, to be honest, for them to make any sort of flight to safety. But I certainly could have seen somebody going, this is going to bring a lot of uncertainty. Markets hate uncertainty, so I'm going to move into T-bills or something along those lines to avoid it. But honestly, from where I'm sitting, I'm always taking the perspective that the odds of me beating the market are effectively zero. And so I'm going to play the old adage of time in the market versus time in the market. Nothing about my thesis about where certainly American companies go has changed. So I've already got, and I've watched your videos on Ray Dalio, and I know his historical records. But the reason that I still buy into that strategy is because I'm partly my age. So I still have a long time in the market. So I'm not super worried about, a 10-year period where it gets a little flat. I am way in a protective stance. So all of my high risk on stuff is all going to be in the companies I'm building. So I would advise people in a time of massive economic uncertainty, unless you really feel like you have some insider information, not insider trading, but like you really understand that market just obscenely well. I would be going somewhere that is going to ride the turbulence well. So for me, it's my thesis on Bitcoin has remained the same, so I didn't touch anything there. My thesis on the market over the long run that I'm invested for is the same, so I've just left everything there. And I'm already so defensive and have so much in government debt that I left that there. But for me, most of that stuff is really short term because I'm building my own companies. So my big concern is always having your capital tied up somewhere. So right now, I would tell people to make sure that you can move at a moment's notice, that you've got enough capital that you can deploy, that if something really gnarly happens, like if we go into a proper global recession, you want to have enough access to capital that you don't have to worry about your lifestyle for years and years and years. And you want to be able to, if you see like a real opportunity, like for instance, if AI and robotics just absolutely got hammered, I'd want to be able to get into those in a super broad way, very diversified across the sector, because I have no idea who's going to win. But my thesis about the future is so aggressively clear. I could be wrong, obviously, but it's so clear to me what the next, call it 5 to 7 years is going to look like, that if I saw that segment depressed, then I'd be pretty eager to get in at a discount.
I love AI and Bitcoin, and we are going to dive into those two topics for sure, because we're going to have a big conversation around that and what the next 5 to 7 years looks like for sure. But what I heard you saying was, number one, for your current position. So you have famously sold Quest Nutrition for whatever $1 billion deal that was. And so you're in more of a defensive state.
For sure.
However, I would add on to that regardless of what state you're in, even if you're still trying to make your money, I would listen to what you said, which is you're focused on your businesses because that's where you make your money. And then you're trying to defend and keep the capital that you have. And so I think people that are thinking about the short term, trying to trade that to make more money, are probably going to end up on the wrong side of the timing.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you know this better than I do, but I would be so curious. I've heard a data point that rings so true to me, which is that something, and this is for sure true in the crypto world, 5% of the wallets make 95% of the gains. So it's like there are people that they're in those WhatsApp and Signal groups. They're betting on culture. They know how much they can influence said culture, and they win, and basically everybody else loses. I'm just not. That game to me is so crazy. So I get I'm a very particular flavor of person who talks about the market, but all the betting, all the gambling, that stuff to me is like a major turnoff.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's what the crypto space has turned into. I mean, meme stocks are jokes, right? And so it's turned into a crypto casino at this point.
Literally, yes.
Literally jokes.
Aggressively agree with that.
Yeah. Sad story. Somebody who was in one of my training programs, I'd consider him a friend now. He had sort of lost a lot in the crypto space, decided he was going to go all in, Bitcoin only from here on out. Built up a pretty big personal brand, made a lot of money, did pretty good. Had about $6 million in Bitcoin. He's young, in his late 20s. The crypto thing kind of called again. He started pumping. He started a crypto trading group. He made a lot of money, $12,000 memberships he sold like 200 people, made a couple $1 million selling memberships, but they all lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So then he started a meme trading group.
Oh, God.
And it was about 3 weeks ago, he messaged me, sent me a text message. And he said, "Hey, Mark, can we talk? I messed up really bad, and I need to talk because I have this famous story of kind of losing everything in 2008. And I got on the phone with him, and he's like, "Man, I chased the memes all the way to the bottom, and I lost all my money, $6 million.
Jesus.
And not only that, but everybody that was paying him to be in that meme trading group as well. So anyway, I want to dive deeper into tariffs. I do want to get into Bitcoin AI. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. But if we talk about tariffs, like I said, you've been all over it. It's the talk of the town, if you will, all over the news. But you talked about like Trump's tariff strategy. Now, a lot of people, actually, let me start with this. You said that, I think on your intro, you said that nobody has any idea what's going on or what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can accurately predict how this is going to play out. People have theses, and that's good. But
so certainly in a complex system, the law of unintended consequences is going to kick in. And so you start trying to play with a couple pieces of a complex system, and we have multiple systems together. Certainly the unintended consequences will win. But the narrative seems to be with mainstream media that Trump and his team are a bunch of buffoons and have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of this, half the world's going to look like morons, and the other half is going to have been right to some degree. But I don't think anybody right now should have the degree of confidence that I see people putting forward. Trump really is, the right way to think of him is he is the CEO of America, and he's going for Mount Rushmore. Whether it's going to work or not, I legitimately have no idea. I can articulate a very kind, generous read on what he's doing, and I pay a lot more attention to Scott Bessent and Lutnick than I do to Trump. Trump is a chaos agent. Maybe the chaos is exactly what the system needs right now, but if you really want to understand, again, whether they're right or not, they have a very easy to follow string of logic. And it just becomes a question to what you were saying. Cool, your first sort of consequences, yeah, there's a chance that those will play out just like you're saying. The bad news is this is an insanely complicated system where egos of other nations are getting involved. This is like a huge gamble you're playing in with the setup of Thucydides' trap. So it's you v. China. You're fighting for the whole world at a time where Bretton Woods is dead. So you've got to come up with a whole new monetary system. And Trump is like pulled the pin out of the grenade and tossed it and has gone, okay, this is going to break the mold. And I've got to get everybody out of that mold so that I can move them into something new. And I'm perfectly willing to believe that they have a vision for what that something new is. They've articulated it. There's probably the part they're saying, and then there's my mind read about the part they're not saying, which we'll see if I end up being right about it. And for people that don't know me, I am not emotionally invested in being right. I am only interested. The only way to make sense of all the words coming out of my mouth are I am trying to accurately map the way the world works. And
where it's going.
Yeah. Well, so if you know how the world works, then you have a sense of where it's going. If you do not understand how the world actually works, you're never going to be able to figure out where this is going. I try to follow everything from a cause and effect standpoint. So I will routinely have people interface with me as if I'm saying Trump is right. He has to do this. This is wonderful. It's going to work. I'm not at all saying that. I'm saying this is the logic of what they're laying out. This might be a hidden layer. And if these things are accurate, it should play out like this. And now, like everybody, I'm just going to watch and see if my mental map is accurate. I've already explained what I'm actually doing with my money, so people don't need to guess about what bags I'm pumping or anything like that. I'm trying to mentally map the world and see if I end up being accurate, not so I can feel good about being right, so I can say, cool, this map of the world of this moment had a high degree of predictive validity. That's it. That's all I'm going for. So, yeah, I think that this system is so complicated, they're running what I call the shoot me in the ear bro strategy, where it's like,
explain that.
Oh my God. So when Trump first got shot in the ear, somebody who I know and respect said he probably just faked it and he was just doing it for attention.
Yeah.
And I was like, hold on. You actually think that he said to somebody, go ahead.
Shoot this off my head. Sure.
Graze my ear. That's so dangerous. There's no way.
Yeah.
This feels like that. It's so high risk what he's doing. If he pulls it off and this ends well, and we completely reorganize the world order in America's favor, and we now get to take advantage of being the world's either first or second largest economy, depending on who you speak to, and we get all that benefit resounding to the U.S. We get out of all of the problems that we have with China controlling all of our manufacturing. That is crazy. We are in a Cold War with very high potential for being a kinetic war with China. They can't control your manufacturing. So that has to change. But the way that he's going about it with the just hyper aggressive, ultra fast is shoot me in the ear. And so if you nick him and he just bleeds a little, and is like, the world's trying to kill me, and now everybody rallies around him. Amazing. But an inch in either direction, and he's dead.
Yeah.
So this is when I really go prognostication mode, I'm like, it starts working, but not in time for the midterms. He loses the midterms. It flips. They no longer control the House. He becomes lame duck, and Republicans are out in 4 years. That's like if I were going to say 51-49, because again, I really do feel like I'm guessing. It's just such a complicated system. That would be, I would give the edge to that. It just won't work in time, even if ultimately it would have.
One thing that I've seen, so the last time we had this big of a drawdown in the markets was in 2022, October 2022, when Biden was president. And nobody was saying it was all Biden's fault. Granted, he didn't go throw a grenade, to your point, or the illustration that you gave. But today, this morning in the gym, I saw on the news, right? It's just like Trump, 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 and it's all his fault.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is he did move by executive order, so a lot of it is sort of on him. But if they're going to assign this whole crash to him, if he pulls it off, they're going to have to give him all the credit for it.
And they won't, so brace yourself for that.
And they won't. But I want to go back. You said that the risk is so high. I want to put a pin in that and come back to that. But just going back to, we do have no idea of the future. Tomorrow's not guaranteed for any of us. Certainly it's a complex system, but I want to talk about the competency of the people. So, I mean, I've seen many interviews of Howard Lutnick. I don't know if you saw the one of them on the All In pod.
Yeah,
I mean,
great.
Very smart, very capable. The way that he's looking at like he said, like you hear about the debt of the country, 36 trillion. You hear about the deficit of the country. You hear about the income and the expense of the country. But as a business owner, there's a number that's glaring, that's missing out of that. What about the balance sheet? And like just hearing like an approach like that in a business mind, number one. But then you have Besant. And you said you listened to him quite a bit. He gave a pretty good interview on Tucker recently.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people on Twitter and YouTube, people that I respect, people that I know, and people that I align with their worldview, and they're just telling, whoa, this guy's making all these mistakes. He didn't understand this. He didn't understand that. It's like,
Yeah. You're
you're not smarter than Scott Besant. So Scott Besant's pedigree, right? He worked for the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Druckenmiller, the second greatest of all time, Soros. But specifically what he did working for those guys, right? Specifically what they did was take down countries and manipulate currencies. That's what they did.
Dude, take down the Bank of England.
The Bank of England.
Not a rando, like, small country that's hyperinflating their currency. The Bank of England. It's pretty crazy.
The Bank of England. So basically, he was hired to do the opposite of that. So understanding what makes the Bank of England vulnerable, what makes they've taken down many other countries since the Bank of England, what makes those countries vulnerable, being over-leveraged, being offsides. And now he's been hired, as he said on Tucker, like to sell dollars around the world, right? So he understands that part. So what could we do to do the opposite of that? But more specifically, I mean, you took down Bank of England, but China is a pretty big thing, game, if we would call it that, right? So understanding what makes the U.S. dangerous and how can we de-risk the U.S., but then specifically what are China's leverage points. And you know, he said on Tucker a couple times that he sees China in a recession, depression, maybe we can box them in. We have no idea, but to say that he doesn't know what he's doing would be, I think, a mistake. I don't know. Aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that if you're going to have anybody run the playbook that they're running, you've got some of the greatest capital allocators on planet Earth who have made unimaginable amounts of money by saying, I understand how global economics works, and I'm going to bet hugely that I'm accurate.
Right.
And they've won. And so
over and over and over.
So many of these guys that I look at that are just like the world's greatest capital allocators, I'm like, they're all like, this could work. Listen, take Ray Dalio. I think you and I may see him a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Ray has made just unimaginable amounts of money doing this game, has this crazy historical perspective, and he's very much in my camp, which is you have to do something because of what's going on with China. You have to do something because of the debt. Like these things cannot stand.
Right.
So given that inaction is not an option.
Right. And that's what I wanted to ask.
Then it's like, what do you do? Now, again, if you listen to Trump, it's like, that's way too crazy. I don't want to do that. And maybe there is some of that. Maybe he's doing way too much art of the deal, all that stuff, and he's pissing off all of our allies, and they're going to be very necessary for us to weather this storm well. But when you listen to Lutnick and Besant, it's like, okay, I at least understand what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah.
So some of the early signs are there that, again, if you can graze the ear and not shoot the patient in the head, it could work. But we'll see. And to be very specific, the big thing I would think people should look at right now, if you really want to understand part of the game they're playing and whether this is going to work, because of how much of the debt has to be refinanced, you've got to get the yield on the 10-year Treasury down, and they're doing it. Now, the question is, do you like the method by which they're doing it? That's a different question, but they're already driving it down.
They could keep loading the front end like Janet Yellen did. And just for comparison, Janet Yellen was a academic, a Keynesian academic, an MMTer. Again, back to Besant, an academic. Like,
just MMT freaks me out.
So she's a MMT academic. Besant literally ran the playbook for the two greatest investors of all time. And you said we're successful. Stanley Druckenmiller is the GOAT because 30 years without a loss.
It's crazy.
Without a loss.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. But back to the risk. So the risk is really high, to your point. You get my ear, take my head out. But to your point, inaction really isn't an option either. And Besant sort of made that statement. So he said, like, the top 10% owns 88% of equities. 88%. 40% owns 12% of the market. And the bottom 50 are in debt. So it's not working for them. And so, like, we have this massive risk if we don't do something, the debt, all these things. So I think that's interesting. I think at the time of this recording, which is the 7th, the latest I saw, already 80 countries have already come together saying they want to strike a deal. That's what the latest I saw today. Even the EU now said they're ready to strike a deal and go down to zero. So it seems like it's coming together pretty quickly. Probably not for China.
Yeah, China's making very different noises with their face. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, look, how much of this is hearsay, how much of it's real? I have not seen coming from China this directly, but I've heard about it indirectly, that they're prepared to go all the way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, you guys don't want to play ball. Not only are we going to do retaliatory strikes with tariffs, but we're now going to openly sell your IP. Again, I don't know that's true. I want to be very clear. I am unfortunately right now spreading rumors. But that is certainly a weapon that they have in their toolkit that a lot of other countries don't. The thing that they have gotten extremely good at, and this is not derogatory, they've gotten very good at going, cool, that's how it's done. Now we're going to show you how to do it at scale, hyper efficiently. And so they've gotten just ridiculously good at that. And so they do have, and this goes back to this whole idea of choke points. They have a choke point for us on manufacturing. Because of that, they have a choke point on us from an IP perspective. And you can't let those play out negatively. And this is exactly how things escalate. This is how you go from a Cold War to something that threatens to be kinetic really fast. Because if they do that with our IP, we have to get aggressive.
Yeah.
So
there's Taiwan on the table, potentially taking Taiwan. There's dumping U.S. treasuries, which is another option, would force the QE. So there's a lot of things that China could do. But I did see today also that Trump said that I think by the 10th that he's going to increase their tariffs another 50%.
Yep.
So yeah, it could escalate.
But that's retaliation for the retaliation.
Right.
So we'll see how that all plays out. But China is not being conciliatory at all. And so this is the part that worries me. So you have the two players on the board that matter. You have the U.S. and China that are being escalatory with each other. And now they're going to be fighting for allies. And so you hear Elon making noises about, hey, we should basically have free trade with Europe. We should be able to go back and forth. I mean, as if America and the EU were all part of the European Union and let anybody go where anybody wants. So I get where he's coming from, and he sees America and Europe as like a super ally, because then if we were truly lockstep with Europe, which we are aggressively not, but if we were truly in lockstep with Europe, now we've got enough economic might that we could really stand up to China economically. But we'll see.
Yeah, lines will be drawn. I think that's looking only at one component of the board. If you look at other components of the board, so it's not just the tariffs, right? It's making America easier to invest in. So strengthening the dollar and the treasury asset, number one. If Besant thinks that China's boxed in, potentially, and the yuan is going to have to be debased in order to keep up with this, China's less investable, and a lot of that comes back to the U.S. But also, when you add in the massive tax cuts, the spending cuts, and then the massive deregulation cuts, I think, and then sort of the drill baby drill energy dominance narrative, those are other pieces of the board that I think weigh in. But But we'll see. We're just speculating at this point. That's all we can do. That's the fun, right? Playing that. But I think history books are going to be talked about this period in time.
That is for sure.
So we get the benefit of living through that.
Is it the benefit? I'd really like to learn from it. That is for sure. So moving forward, I will be armed with a lot more information. But there is a supposed Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. And we live in interesting times. And humans don't like change. In the volatility, there's certainly opportunity, but it will also, the average person, if it goes south, the average person just gets clobbered.
Well, not the 50% of people who own nothing.
No, it'll be worse for them for sure because they have no protective mechanism. So the problem is, when you were saying that we'd have to turn to QE, the good news is that would make the debt manageable. So you, in my words, you steal from all Americans, which just absolutely decimates the poor and working class, but you steal from everybody by inflating the money supply. And now that makes the debt worth far less, and it becomes far easier to pay off if you can get some economic growth. So if you can both weaken the dollar, keep it the reserve currency, and through deregulation, unlock GDP growth, you actually can pull this off. But if you're doing it through QE, then you're going to exacerbate the difference between the rich and the poor. And that will get ugly. And it really does become a let them eat flat screens moment where, sure, people have a lot of cheap stuff, but that's how revolutions start. So that is the one that I think is most immoral. But
there's a couple thoughts on that. Like one, Besant talked about on Tucker how last year, 2024, summer of 2024, we had two records set. Number one record was more Americans visiting Europe in the summer than on record. But we also had more Americans going to food banks on record at the same time. And so that's sort of that divide, if you will. And unfortunately, to your point, as the debasement continues, then your wages buy less and less, and more people go to the food bank.
Yeah, and I imagine your audience completely understands that. The problem is that the average American doesn't.
Yeah.
So they just do not understand how money actually works. They don't understand the dangers of debt. They don't understand how it could possibly be bad that the government is giving them money. And so we end up in this death spiral where they can tell something's wrong. They can tell they're getting screwed, but they don't understand how. So this has been the conundrum of the last 3 years of my life, is as I've learned about how money actually works. Because when COVID hit, I thought, okay, I've worked in the inner cities. I had 1,000 employees that grew up like hard. And when COVID lockdowns happened, I thought they're all going to lose their jobs and they're just going to be toast. So I started making financial content to help them out and to hope that I could give them some understanding of how they're going to weather this storm. And as I started, because I've always been good at making money, but not investing money. And so I wanted to learn about investing so I could help them out. And as I started learning about it, I was like, wait a second, like this does not work the way that I thought it did.
Yeah.
And realized, oh my God, that printing money, if I was going to oversimplify my own stance, would be printing money is immoral and is exactly how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I understand it's more complicated than that, but when you simplify something down to its essence, there's a clarity.
Yeah. I want to, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, which I consider the cheat code today. But I want to go back to kind of what you just talked about there and for a minute. I want to kind of go back. You talked about scrounging in your couch cushions to having $1 billion company. And so what I see, so kind of going back to this sort of trade war, bringing back jobs, the tale of two Americans, if you will, it's not just that the U.S. offshored its manufacturing base, which it did, but those were low-level jobs. And so bringing back T-shirts and sneakers to the U.S. for manufacturing is not an answer for that, right? So nations have to grow their way out of it, and we grew our way out of it. Like technology takes low-level tasks so we can work on higher-value tasks. But it's more about moving from the industrial age to the information age. So, right, we had those giant manufacturing facilities, and everybody smart and dumb worked equally on the assembly lines. We had this massive middle class. But in the information age now, a person with a laptop and AI can create $1 billion business. I mean, we'll see that, right? And so then it's like almost more like a meritocracy. So we have all these people who were trained from an industrial school system with an industrial mindset, but now they find themselves in this information age, but they're not equipped with the mindset or the tools in order to succeed in that world. So they still think in terms of like, just get a job and that job will take care of me, as opposed to I should change my mindset to learn skill sets and use those skill sets to bring more value to increase the amount of money I make. Because we have make money and then we have invest money. So I'm curious, I mean, your own mindset shift, right? Going from the couch cushions, to your point, to $1 billion company, you had to learn that model. And is that something that you're trying to teach in this? You said your workers, right? Trying to kind of teach them how this works. Are you trying to kind of give them that mindset?
Okay, so I think you have to face really two things.
I want to take a break real quick and just say that there's only so much you can learn through videos. Yeah, build your knowledge, build your skills, but you need to build your relationships. Relationships plus skills equals money. So come build your relationships and your knowledge at the Bitcoin Conference, May 27th through 29th in Las Vegas. I'm going to be there speaking for the 4th year in a row, and lots of other people way bigger than me. Entertainment, politics, media, finance, you name it, they'll be there. So come check it out. Save some money with my code Mark Moss, or I'll put a link down below. If you use my code to save some money, I'm going to do a private meetup just for you and some of my friends. So let me know. Use that code, save some money, send me a message, and we'll get you in the private meetup, and I hope to see you in Las Vegas.
Generational poverty is a mindset problem. It's not a money problem. I expect that to be very inflammatory. It is every time I say it. But nonetheless, having seen it up close, you realize, wait a second, this guy's smarter than me, and he's going nowhere fast. So good hardware, bad software. The really bad news is, while it is very possible for somebody to change their mindset as an adult, I ballpark it. This is not a real number, but this is so directionally accurate that if people form their worldview with this, it will have high predictive validity. Only 2% of people are capable or willing, however you want to say it, to change their mindset once they're an adult. So I learned pretty quickly that I'm a filtering mechanism. I've given up on changing adults that are in the 98%. Maybe there will come somebody who's better than me and they can do it. But I've really, really tried. So long before there was a camera on me, long before I thought about YouTube, any of that, I told my employees, I will come in early, I will stay late, I will teach you anything that I know about entrepreneurship, because I want you to be here. One, I want you to be the best person you can be. That benefits me. But I want you to stay here not because you feel forced. I want you to stay here because you know I care more about your future than your own mother. So started what I called Quest University, and literally I taught them anything to the point that we had 3 of the people the sort of informal students that came through that started competitive nutrition companies. So I was like, I will tell you anything. And
3 students started competing companies. Out of how many?
Oh, God.
Thousands?
No, not thousands,
hundreds?
but hundreds for sure. And in all of that, there was also 2 students that were in it, and one of them punched another one in the face because he said, you've changed, you've started reading. And I was just like, wow. So I'm up against like really stupid cultural programming. And the people that actually did something, the 2%, have some, obviously not all, but some have gone on to start companies that are still running today. And I'll get texts from them and updates. I'm just like, this is so gratifying. And then I remember how many people that I tried to explain this stuff to and walk them through. So anyway, that becomes a genesis of the YouTube channel. And I'm like, okay, I want to impart this mindset advice. And again, realize I'm the bat symbol in the sky. I throw it up, and the people for whom that already matches, they respond. And a big part of the reason I started changing my content, because my first few years in YouTube were all mindset. That's all I talked about. And I just realized that for the vast majority of people engaging with that content, it was spiritual entertainment. And I'm like, I'm already rich. So this does not make sense. This is not interesting for me.
What do you mean spiritual entertainment?
I have a 2-hour declining arc of influence on people, and I can make them feel like anything is possible. And they feel very good, very capable. But then they have to come back for more, come back for more, come back for more.
Yeah.
Because they're not actually trying to gain a set of skills that allow them to go execute in the world, in that hyper uncertain world that we were talking about a few minutes ago. That's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is the narcotic-like feeling that they could do that if they wanted to.
Right.
And that feels so good that they just never do anything with it.
Right.
And that's wholly uninteresting to me. Right. So by temperament, I'm just like, okay, well, if that's how this works, then I'm not interested. So I began reinventing my channel to get to what I do now, which is talk about the most important things you should be thinking about in your life. Because if you get it right, the consequences financially, emotionally, longevity of relationships, all of that, it's going to matter so much. And if you get it wrong, your life is worth on every measurable metric, from wealth, health, emotional stability, progress, which is a foundational pillar of human happiness. I mean, just literally every dimension. So that's the focus now. But okay, so all of that is around just that idea of how do you help people with a mindset thing. But the second part that you have to face is that some people do not have the intellectual horsepower, and no matter what you teach them, they are forever going to need a blue-collar job. And I'll even say maybe it's not intellectual horsepower. Maybe it's just temperament. Maybe it's skill set, that their skill set is so visceral that they need to make things, build things, touch things, move things. They need to live in the world of electrons and move them around. And evolution for so long could not over-index on the thinkers, the intellectuals, who now run the world, but they certainly did not for millennia.
Right.
So I think what we're learning now is you hollow that blue-collar segment of your population out at your own peril. First, they start killing themselves, and you can actually see deaths of despair bringing down the life expectancy of men. If you take out the deaths of despair, it bounces back to normal. So right. It's so frequent that it is impacting the national stat on the length of male life in America. That's so insane to me. Yeah. So I'm like, you have to address that. So I bang the drum for, you've got to bring some manufacturing back to the U.S. because there are humans by temperament or intellectual power. They have to be in the world of physical electrons, moving them around. Just period, full stop, end of story. And unless we start genetically modifying people, like, you're going to have a base of largely men that you either keep numb or brace yourself for impact when they revolt.
Yes, I would agree with that, right? We have to have purpose, we have to have meaning, we have to have something to do. But does it have to be dumb labor, or can it be smarter labor? So, for example, you could talk about the feminism movement and how many jobs it's taken from men. I was just recently thinking about my own company and the amount of people we employ, and how the majority of them are women, even in my own company, right? And so, like, how many men are sort of put out of the workforce based off of that? And those are physical jobs. I mean, not hard labor jobs, but physical office jobs, right? White collar jobs, I guess you would say. But when the Industrial Revolution came, you had a machine that could do the work of 5,000 field workers, but those field workers eventually went on to do higher level things like science and medicine, things like that. In this vision of Trump re-onshoring manufacturing, Lutnick says, yeah, it's going to be automated. So someone's going to have to build the facilities. So there's hard, blue collar labor there. But someone's also going to have to build the robotics, program the machines, run the machines and stuff like that. So to your point, I mean, we need the physical things, but could they do those physical things, or you think that people just are incapable of even learning something like that?
Your intelligence is a spectrum, and there will always be people that are going to be ill-suited to an information technology only world. Now, AI is a meteorite screaming towards Earth. So the things I'm saying right now, I'm just ignoring that meteorite for now.
We're going to come back
yet.
To it.
I have no doubt it's one of my favorite topics, but nonetheless, you really have to bifurcate your conversation into what do we do right now today versus then how do we manage that transition period when it happens. And I've written extensively in the realm of fiction on this idea. But you have to deal with people that certainly do not have the intellectual horsepower to do things other than move electrons. You got to do something. Yeah. So what that answer is, manufacturing certainly is one. Obviously, a lot of that's going to go to robotics. Now, if you look backwards, and this is always a good test, when you look backwards, every time a new technology comes into place, it ends up creating more jobs, not less, even though it always seems like it's about to put everybody out of work, and then it just opens up all these new avenues, and the people with the talents flood in. So as an act of faith, I choose to believe that will happen here as well, that there is something I just can't conceive of yet that will
if people can
continue
up
the
level
trend.
their skills. That's the problem.
Well,
that's the
it's-
conundrum for you.
Okay, so
More
now
jobs,
we go,
yes, but are the people able to go into those jobs?
No. So this is where I want people to remember 2% of people can make that kind of change. 98% won't. Evolution of culture or otherwise never cares about any given generation. So evolution does not care if we're about to introduce a utopia, but some people just can't cross that threshold because they completely emotionally derail because they can see I am getting left behind. I am a trucker. I'm not going to learn to code. I don't want to work in a robotics factory. Like that person.
But those were things they refused to do. I don't want to learn how to code. I refuse to work in robotics.
Yeah, but that's the fact. That's what you're up against. Anything else is an abstraction. So humans are such that if they're a 45-year-old, they are going to, many of them, it will never be 100%, thank God, but the overwhelming majority will not be willing to make that transition. It will be too hard on them. And so they will check out.
And those are the deaths of despair you're talking about.
That'll be one avenue. Depending on what age they are, it may also manifest as active rebellion.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I didn't want to eat my vegetables, and my dad would tell my mom, well, if he's hungry enough, he'll eat. And I think about the sign in the state parks, don't feed the animals because the animals become dependent. But humans aren't animals, right? So like if we're hungry enough, we're going to go dig a hole. We'll go work, I would think. So I'm afraid of, people are calling for like the need for UBI to offset that sort of problem that you're talking about. But it seems like if we didn't have that safety net, people would go work, right?
Depends on how disruptive this moment's going to be. I think the reason that so many people, they reach into their brain and say, how do we solve this problem? How do we re-educate people? All of that. And they understand the rate of change. Most people do not understand the rate of change of AI. So think about this. If Sam Altman is right and it's 300% year over year, okay, first of all, that's more than exponential growth. So that's like it. In fact, if you want to make it exponential, it's exponential growth every 5.9 months. So that is almost a percentage improvement every day.
And we're seeing it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So the rate of change is going to hit people like a sledgehammer. Like even if they're able to adapt to wave 1, wave 2, those are going to be like done in 6 months. So what do you do when it's wave 3, 4, 5? And they're like, I can't keep up. I don't want to keep up anymore. This is too confusing. People will get paralyzed by the fear of all the change. And when you really start thinking through this problem, eventually your brain hands you back a null signal. And it says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what this is going to look like. This is what everybody calls the technological event horizon or the singularity. So you're at a point where you can no longer predict the future, not even a future that's 6 months away. So at that point, I'm telling you, there will be massive distress. And when humans are scared, they act crazy. So people are like, I can't have a populace that's both scared and hungry. So it's a dark view of what's going to happen, but I think that's very real. We're going to go through a valley of despair before we come out the other side and we're able to capture all the energy of the sun. And if people haven't thought about this is not an analogy. I mean this literally. Robots eat sunshine. And so the way that they stay energized is we're going to be able to capture the energy from the sun, which is absolutely plentiful, far more plentiful than we need to run even billions of robots to feed all the humans, all of it, all the manufacturing you could ever want to do. It's falling on the earth. I forget how long a single hour, if you could capture 100% of the sunlight that is emitted from the sun, how long it would run the earth. It's a long time.
Yeah.
So we have way more energy than we need. We have a capture problem. Once you realize that unless AI hits an upper bound, which I haven't heard anybody except maybe
you would also have a
Jan
storage
LeCun.
problem.
Yes, but like again, these all are technological problems that show no known reason why we can't solve them. Doesn't mean there isn't one, because there are certain barriers. Like right now, it's can we make the chips fast enough?
Right.
Okay, once we're able to make the chips fast enough, can we get the energy fast enough? If we can get the energy fast enough, can we get the transformers fast enough? And so we'll keep pushing the problem down, but you're going to hit these bottlenecks. But nobody looks at it and says, we won't be able to overcome them. And so if there is no upper bound to intelligence, I will draw a math equation for people. A moron is defined as somebody, I think, with an 81 IQ. Einstein had like 160. Whatever the actual numbers are, The difference between a definitional moron and Einstein is 2.4x. So Einstein was 2.4x times smarter than a moron. And a moron can't even get in the army. So the army's like, I can't even put you forward to get shot. You'll create more problems.
They're like...
hold on, let me finish this. Otherwise, it won't make sense. So you've got Einstein's 2.4x smarter than that. And he's like thinking his way to fundamental insights in physics that bring about nuclear energy, nuclear bombs, GPS, like all the things that have come of the atomic age. That's 2.4x smarter than a moron. People are saying that AI isn't going to be 10 times smarter or 1,000 times smarter or 100,000 times or 1,000,000 times. They're talking about there being no upper limit, which means you get into something that's 1,000,000,000 times smarter. So if you've got Einstein being 2.4x, what happens when you get to 10? So I don't even need people to buy into like the crazy, far-fetched, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000 times smarter. Just 10x would be unrelatable. It would be a world no one that's alive today would recognize. And what's that going to happen in 20 years? Is you really going to make me push it out 30 years? But like, I plan to still be alive. This is not some 300 years from now problem.
No, it's a now problem. I've been coaching my team today. We had our calls, and I said what I've been harping on for the last couple of weeks is like, guys, look, I need you all to be grasping onto these tools right now, because you're either going to use them or you're going to get replaced by them, and our company will get replaced if we don't use these right now. I want to come back to that. We're going to dig into the AI piece. I just want to finish this last piece, though. So you started teaching mindset. You realized people need it. You started teaching it. It started to become sort of a fool's errand for you, at least on YouTube. But you still do coach on mindset, I believe, right? Like that's still sort
of... For the 2% that are actually going to do something with it, yes.
So what would you say some mind shift or tools that you could give to people that might be useful for them today? Maybe someone who already has a little bit of high agency that's ready to sort of make that jump. Do you have some frameworks or blueprints?
100%. Mindset is extraordinarily powerful and extraordinarily simple, but people don't do it because of a small handful of reasons. Okay. The ultimate framework is really simple. You at all times need to know what end state you are seeking. What's your goal? If you don't have your goal, literally stop. Nothing matters. You need to be able to say your goal in 35 words or less. It needs to contain a what, by when, and how much. So the how much is like, what's the KPI? How am I going to know I achieved that? I want to make the world a better place. Okay. In what way? Like, how will you define it? Are you going to feed like 1 million people? Whatever it is. If you've got that goal, now cool. Goals make demands. So now there's going to be a string of things you're going to have to do successfully in order to achieve that. But you have to overcome what I call the chaos machine. The chaos machine is life. The second law of thermodynamics is that in a closed system, everything moves towards disorder. Yeah. So if you want to bring order to a closed system, you have to pour energy in. So, I mean, it's not a metaphor, that's literal. So you're going to have to be highly intentional with very directional energy to overcome the never-ending set of problems that will be put before you as you try to achieve your goals. Most people break emotionally because it makes you confront something, and this is the big one, that people don't understand about themselves, which is that they trust their emotions, and they shouldn't. Your emotions will lie to you all the time. Your emotions are merely your body's way of trying to express something to you from the subconscious. So it does not speak in words, it speaks in feelings. But those feelings are tuned to make sure that you live long enough to have kids that have kids. Now, unless you just told me my North Star is to have kids that have kids, then your emotions are going to be out of step with that. So now what people have to do, instead of steering by emotion, which is, I'm telling you, the vast majority of the planet steers by emotions. They do the things that make them feel the way they want to feel, and they avoid the things that make them feel the way they don't want to feel.
Right.
But if you're going to make progress, you're going to fail a lot. And failure is not going to make you feel the way you want to feel unless you pull a trick, which I'll get to in a second. So the rule is you have your goal. You know exactly what you need to do. That goal now makes demands. All of those demands are basically how you're going to overcome the obstacles between where you are and where you want to get to. And there's only one way to do that, and that is to think from first principles using what I call the physics of progress. So progress works in a certain way, and you're going to take the framework of the scientific method and you're going to recontextualize it for life, for business, for relationships, whatever. It is a minor tweak, but it's still the same idea. And that is, you're going to say, I know where I want to go. And I know what the obstacle is between where I'm at and where I want to get to. And now I'm going to come up with my best guess, my hypothesis on how to overcome that obstacle. And the physics of progress is a me thing. So other people, basically everybody does the same thing. That's why I call it the physics. Everybody calls it something different. The only way to run it is to think from first principles. So you have to get out from under your emotions. You have to be asking yourself one simple question. How does the world actually work? And then to understand that your brain lies to you all the time. Your brain is a shortcut machine. It is always looking for a rule of thumb. Like, how does this work? I just want to get the gist. The problem is if your gist is wrong, then it's going to lead you nowhere fast. But because people build their self-esteem around being better, faster, stronger, smarter, they focus on being right because it makes them feel good. And they want to do the things that make them feel the way they want to feel. And so this is what you see in politics. This is what you see everybody screaming over tariffs because everybody wants to be right.
Right.
And this is why you see me banging the drum. I'm just trying to figure out if I've mapped the world accurately. Now, why do I care about that? Because my life is driven by what I just walked you through. I know what my goal is, trying to get there. That goal makes a whole bunch of demands. I'm going up against the chaos machine, but I know something that seemingly a lot of people do not internalize, which is that skills have utility. Meaning I don't read a book so I can say that I read it. I read a book because it gives me information. I turn that information into a thing I can now do in the real world that other people don't know how to do. That allows me to overcome more obstacles, to outcompete them, and make progress. So I don't care if I embarrass myself by saying this is what I think is going to happen. There's a 51% chance that this all goes wrong, and then it goes swimmingly and it just looked like it was guaranteed, or it just completely crashes and burns. And all the people that were like, see, I told you so. I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that. You have completely misjudged what I'm trying to do here. I needed to plant a flag, which is why people can get me to answer a question literally about anything. And I'll say, okay, this is how I'm thinking about it now. Because I don't care if they make fun of me in a year. What I know is skills have utility. And that as long as I learn my lesson, I can go, ooh, I thought this, but this actually ended up happening. That means that I have a wrong vision of how the world works, but this gave me a little bit more information. And because I don't have an ego about it, I'm just going to be like, cool, I'm going to update my thinking. Now I'm ready to move forward in a more effective way. And so if people just run that all day, every day, they can have all the success that their emotional stability, their drive, and their level of intellect will allow.
That's a really good walkthrough on that mental model.
Well, thank you.
Starting with the end in mind, living with intentionality, right, on everything. It's something that I come across quite a bit. It's somewhere I've spent a lot of my time thinking about lately. I have some high-end coaching programs, and we coach some very successful people. And I find that they come to me with basic, very vague questions like, should I buy Bitcoin? Should I sell this asset? Should I sell my business? Should I, whatever, right? And they're never able to come to any type of decisions. And I found after years of doing this, it's because none of them are clear on where they're trying to go. They don't know what problem they're trying to solve specifically. So then almost no path looks correct. It's the Alice in Wonderland, right? Like, which path should I go? I don't know. Where are you trying to go? I don't know. Well, then any path will do.
Right.
What would you say, because you've spent a lot of time thinking about this, what would you say if you were to go downtown and stop 100 people, how many of them could articulate in 35 words or less their specific goal?
Zero.
I
have people in my program that have listened to my classes. They come before me for the live part, and I'm like, cool, what's your goal? Yeah. They think they know. That's the terrifying part. So this is, and listen, everything I teach because I made all of these mistakes. I am constantly catching myself falling into the same traps. So this is not me like, see, I get it and you guys don't. This is me just like, I get what it's like to be a human. But we are all trapped inside of a brain that uses emotions to make us act. And people think they're making decisions based on logic, but they're not. They're making decisions based on feelings that give them the ability to act. And once I realized, oh, my emotions are actually not good at detecting what I need to do in order to make progress. And so I'll end up in this eternal loop of doing what feels good, protecting my ego, never wanting to admit that I'm wrong. And that's going to go nowhere fast. So what if I flipped it and said, I'm going to value myself for my willingness to stare nakedly at my inadequacies. And so I'm going to be proud of the fact that I can be laughed at longer than the next person, that people can think I'm a fool. But behind the scenes, my knowledge is growing.
Yeah.
And so I take myself from scrounging on my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car to go to a job interview to ultimately building my multiple companies, selling one of them for $1 billion. So once you do that, you realize, whoa, like actually getting good at things is the name of the game. But in a way where, like the Kobe Bryant quote, boos don't block dunks. Meaning, no matter how much somebody hates you, if you're good enough, they can't stop you. And so becoming obsessed with that idea is ultimately the thing that frees people. But you have to get out from under the how bad it feels when you realize that you're wrong. So anyway, the whole idea is that feelings will make it feel like the story you're telling yourself is true instead of a hypothesis. And so they have a vague sense of what they want to do. It feels good. And so because it feels good, they believe they have clarity, but they don't.
The next question is, I want to shift into AI, but this piece is actually a segue that I think is really important. So I just had this coaching program here last week, and I brought in some high-level entrepreneurs. And this time I decided to get a little bit smarter, and I sent them pre-work. And this pre-work was for them to do some exercises, spend a couple hours to figure out really clearly, specifically, a SMART goal, what it is they're trying to achieve, so that we could spend the time here for a day and a half building on top of that. And they came back with the most vague ideas, even after I gave them very detailed, specific prompts, mental exercise, all these things, right? And so what I find is that I often say that the quality of your life comes down to the questions that you ask.
Great quote.
And when you ask vague questions, you get back vague answers. And so they all came with these very vague goals. And I'm like, so then we have to spend half the day just trying to get clear on the goals, right? And so that's problem number one. And so what I find from that is, now if we take that into AI, and a lot of people think that AI is going to make them so much smarter. I don't find that to be the case, because people can't think clearly, they can't think specifically, and they ask terrible questions. So when you ask AI, write me a book, what are you going to get? Should I buy Bitcoin? Like, is my investment portfolio de-risked? Like, when you ask it broad, vague questions, you're going to get back terrible answers. And so really, these types of people who are unable to think clearly and ask smart, specific questions aren't really going to be able to get the full benefit of a tool like AI.
Facts. Yeah, that is it. Well, so right now I'll say I'm kind of glad, because we're in this narrow window that I expect to be very brief, where we all still matter in the process, right? So my thing is that so for people that don't know anything about me or know my story, I got into business because I went to film school. I wanted to make movies, and I just could not figure out how to break into the industry. Finally, write a script, gets turned into a film. It was a horrible experience. I was completely devastated. I had met these two very successful entrepreneurs, and they said, listen, man, you come into the world with your hand out. And if you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. So you should get into business and get rich. And I was like, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. I thought it would take 18 months. It took 15 years, but it worked. And along the way, I realized all the things that we're talking about here. Skills have utility, that you can control your own life. But it was a very grueling process of realizing all of the things that I try to teach people. But everybody ends up getting locked in that I'm lost and I don't realize I'm lost. And that's the problem. So take taste. This is the biggest thing with AI. If you don't realize that you're asking AI to do something that you don't have any taste in, you're in trouble. So right now, when AI hands me back an answer on like a screenplay that I'm working on, I'll be like, that doesn't make sense. That's cheesy. That's not working. And then the AI is going to say, as it's trained to do, you're right. Now, what if I'm not right? And that's how you get into a death spiral. People either take the first thing it gives them, not understanding the AI is meant to zoom in on what's the most likely thing someone will say, which means it's sort of the most blah answer ever. You've got to get into like a really narrow band over here where it's like, okay, this is unique. This is fresh. I want to bring these different ideas together. No, that's not quite right. And then you can polish on top. And so it basically becomes a way to cut down a lot of work that would otherwise stall you out. Coding is the easy one. It's like as soon as you start, to write that file that you've written 1,000 times. It always has to be like custom built. It just auto populates. Vroom.
Right.
And so now it speeds you up, whatever, 2, 3, 5, 10x. And it will obviously just keep going and get better. But right now is a pretty magical window where if you have built a set of skills, the AI will extend your capabilities. I think of it like an exoskeleton. Like you can now bend over and pick up a much heavier weight than you could before. But if you're already strong, then it's amplifying a really good base.
Yeah. What I've found is I've been an entrepreneur investor my career since I was 18. I started buying homes in South Central LA, fixing and flipping them, and I've built dozens of businesses and exits and all these things and this wide range of things. And I'm this massive generalist. I'm the jack of all trades, master of none. And for the first time, that's to my benefit because AI can make me instantly deep in each one of those pieces, right? So all of a sudden, to your point, this exoskeleton, like I just feel like I'm just like plugged in and like we can just tap into all this thing. But going back to that for a second, so if the majority of people, back to the mindset thing, don't know what they want, can't think specifically, can't think clearly, don't know what questions to ask, the AI isn't going to help them be any better at it. And so what you're going to have is the small percentage, the 2% of people that you said that are able to ask good questions and are able to think strategically are going to be able to tap into this technology. And those 2% of people will continue to see the smaller amount of narrow this divide between wealth and poor, right? Where the 2% are going to excel and the majority of people don't know how to use the tool and they're going to fall further and further behind. And so it sort of exacerbates that. You did an interview with Mark Andreessen and that was really good and warned about, this AI, information war, things like that. And you talked about, the impact on jobs, which we're sort of talking about. But you said there's one job AI can't do. So is that the hope for some people, what AI can't do?
Anything that we think AI can't do right now will be short-lived. I think ultimately once AI is truly agentic and embodied and smarter than any human alive, there just isn't going to be anything that AI can't do. Your only thing is it's not human, and some people are going to care deeply about that. I don't think that will be only benefit. I think that there will be violence, what I call from new Puritans, who really eschew certainly the technological augmentation of a human. They're going to rebel against that. We are already bringing back extinct species.
I saw
people
that
that
today.
Aren't paying attention. Yep. So first the dire wolf, which hasn't been seen in 10,000 years. Next up, they're doing a woolly mammoth. And like actually bring them back, not like simulations, like you can go pet a dire wolf. So humans will eventually start modifying our own DNA, and people are going to have a problem with that. Some people have a problem with that. People are already augmenting themselves with technology. If you've ever seen anybody with a cochlear implant, you've now got the people from Neuralink that can play video games with their minds. And the guys that play it with their minds are saying, you're going to have to create a league for us because we're so much better than people that actually have to use a mouse and keyboard or a controller.
That's a real thing?
Yeah. Right now, this very minute.
Wow. I mean, it is the exoskeleton, right? So we have seen robotics helping people that are paralyzed, things like that. And these are just, to your point, augmented technologies that sort of help us do that. I saw today, and it was all over Twitter, was the Shopify CEO had an internal memo leaked. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't know.
So there was an internal memo leaked from the Shopify CEO, and it mandated that AI usage be a fundamental expectation for all employees. So you won't get a job at Shopify if you're not proficient in it. But even more than that, integrating AI proficiency into performance reviews and encouraging AI exploration in project prototyping. So now getting the job is a requirement. Well, having AI skills is a requirement to get the job. But in your job reviews, if you're not growing in your skill and proficiency with it, that will count against you in your job performance.
For sure.
For sure.
Now, is that getting backlash?
Well, what happened is it got leaked. And so it was like going all over, Twitter. And so the CEO came out and said, hey, here it is. boom, and just like put it out there.
Yeah, like that seems so self-evident. And you said at the beginning, like you're either going to use it or you're going to get replaced by somebody who uses it.
I mean, that's what I'm telling my internal team.
100%. Everybody should be. It's crazy.
Right.
Like if you're not saying that, you're going to get blindsided.
You're going to get blindsided. And we have this, you said we have this period of time, you said where we still matter. I was thinking something different. The saying is that the future is not evenly distributed. And so I tell my team we have about a year before everybody catches up.
Yeah.
And so if we go super hard right now, we have about a year to really gap people. And I think that's going to be super important.
Man, we're having those same conversations inside Impact Theory for sure.
Yeah. Now, AI is amazing. But what I've been really thinking about and starting to, I brought a person on just to start building this out as AI agents. And you mentioned that before. So you think about like AI agents, which there was a book that I read probably 15 years ago, and it was about that. It was called A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. And it talks about how we have a creative side of our brain and an analytical side of our brain, and how, several hundred years ago, they thought we didn't need the creative side of our brain, and they were doing lobotomies and all these things. And so the entire world has been built up for the analytical thinker and SAT scores. So schools built for analytical thinkers, and SAT scores are analytical thinkers. And that has been the right path. My mom wanted me to go be an engineer, right? That was the path she wanted me to go down. I didn't want to do that. But he said that the internet commoditized technical workers, because what happened is it opened up the world. So now I can go on to Upwork or Fiverr, and I can hire a coder or a programmer or a coder or whatever, and now they're in Pakistan or they're in India or wherever they are. And so all of a sudden it commoditized these technical workers. And so he said that the new world is going to be driven by the creative thinker. So not the technical worker, more like a conductor of an orchestra. I don't know how to play the instruments better than any of you, but I can make you make beautiful music together, right? And so you have all these countries basically coming out of poverty with BOP skills, right? And so they're commoditized technical workers, and whether that be research assistants, whether that be paralegals doing briefs, or coders or accountants or whatever it is. And so if I were to hire somebody on Fiverr to go do SEO for me, that's an autonomous agent, but now we can just program AI to do that. And this is gaining speed at a rapid rate. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. What do you see AI agents doing to disrupt sort of the world, and at what speed? Before I give my thoughts.
The speed will be extremely rapid. So by 2027, you'll have agents, you'll have AI basically helping to write AI improvements, running a lot of the experimentations. And so you'll have decades of advancements in a week. And that's the very shrewd minds in the space, the guys that like have been making these predictions that have been coming true, are the ones saying that. That's not me making that number up. So it's 2025 already. We're rapidly approaching the middle of 2025. So this is less than 24 months away that you're seeing like this kind of blinding speed, what they call the intelligence explosion. So that's coming very fast. That will create a work environment for sure that nobody can conceive of. You are at that point officially. Like 2028 is beyond the technological event horizon. Nobody knows what 2028 is going to look like. So the fact that something 3 years from now is like, I can't even begin to tell you what that's going to look like. So in the workforce, the only way from where I'm sitting to make any sense of this is what you said at the beginning, which is you need to be at the edge of it. You need to be deploying it, using it, improving your skill sets, figuring out whatever it is that I'm doing, how do I make this work? And the people that are going to pull away are the people that have taste, that understand when something's good and when it's not. People that have something that they want to build and they have the courage to go build that thing. I think about it a lot. It's like if you take the US economy and it's like a big sheet of glass, and there's like a few really big companies and then, sort of a handful of medium ones. And then for the most part, everything else is just these small companies. You are about to drop that, and those big companies that make up the vast majority of this sheet of glass are just going to shatter into a ton of small companies. And I can't remember if you said it before we started rolling, but there's going to be many billion-dollar companies made by 1, 2, or 3 people. They get together, they deploy full AI orgs, and they just run. They give the AI agents like money, the ability to move, to buy things, to do whatever they need to do. And all of a sudden, all of those employees that you would have historically had, they just go away. And so the question becomes, what does it look like when, let's say, even 30% of the total workforce now starts their own company? Like, what does that do?
Yeah.
How many things will that commoditize? How far will that push innovation? And then how long will it last before it's like, actually, human, you're just kind of slowing me down, and I'm the AI. And it's like, how about you just tell me what you want done and I go do it, and you just sort of sit at home.
That's the utopian dream.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. So there were 2 books written about the future that were hyper prescient. One has already come true. One may be about to come true. That's 1984, The Surveillance State, as terrifying as advertised.
Right.
Then you've got A Brave New World, which was a world of plenty where everybody does drugs to numb themselves. And in a world where you don't have to work for anything, finding meaning and purpose is not going to be easy.
Yeah. If you think about like the base law of economics is based off of scarcity.
Yep.
And so when you think about work and labor and knowledge, it's also built on scarcity. So an attorney is able to charge a premium because they have a scarcity of knowledge that they've been able to acquire, or a doctor has scarcity of knowledge they've been able to acquire. But when knowledge no longer has scarcity, how does that change? And to your point about the agents, I saw this. So we have, like I said, I brought somebody on and we're building out these agent workflows. And I saw this breakdown of somebody, he put it online, and it was basically the org chart. And then all the officers of the company had agent shadows. And the agent shadows would just shadow all their calls, their meetings, all these things. And the CEO could call on a phone call the agent shadow and discuss all the things that's been going on. And now they've got each of the officers' agent shadows communicating between themselves.
That's awesome.
I mean, just like that, right? I mean, we're just in a couple months into this. But when you think about like an AI agent, like go out and find the top 5 business models and just instantly duplicate them for me. And go hire the other agents that you need and the other agents that you need and go build out this agent workforce to go duplicate this. And so instantly disrupt every online company.
Do you know about MCP?
Yeah, the MPC servers. Yeah.
Oh my God. Like the protocol that they're going to be using that will let these AIs talk to each other is this is where it's going to get crazy, because right now agents will dead end pretty quickly. But with the MCP protocol, they're going to be able to go in. AI will be able to talk to all other AI, do their things. And so now, whether it's accessing your calendar, booking a flight, checking hotels, I mean, I can't even imagine going through your Tinder profile for you. I mean, it literally anything that deploys the standard, and Anthropic and OpenAI have already agreed to it. So that's 2 of the big boys. I'd be surprised if more people don't. This is like the TCP IP moment for AI, where now it's just like you can just hyperlink and it all connects. That's going to be cool.
Yeah. So this kind of takes me to the next subject that I want to jump into is Bitcoin. So when I think about Bitcoin, I gave a talk I gave the closing keynote at the Bitcoin conference in Abu Dhabi a few months ago. And I talked about sort of this Bitcoin forecast, 2030, 2040, 2050, and talked about how we have these 50-year repeating tech cycles. And if you put Bitcoin into that, it sort of gives us this roadmap. And a lot of people think that Bitcoin has failed because it's a store of value, but it's not a medium of exchange and blah, blah, blah. But they don't understand the monetary evolution that has to happen and the timeframes that happens. So it hasn't failed. It will get there eventually. But Gresham's law states that good money drives out bad. So we don't have pre-65 quarters and dimes in circulation anymore because they're pure silver. You wouldn't spend that. And if you did, you definitely wouldn't spend it. You'd save it. So you spend the bad money, the post-65, you save the pre, right? So you wouldn't want to use Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee when I can just spend fiat to do that. So then you start thinking, well, how does Bitcoin evolve from that store value to a medium exchange? Well, we would want to use it only for things that it could only be used for. And so then you start thinking, okay, what are the things that it could do that fiat can't, like microtransactions, high-frequency transactions, things like that, and you start to think about AI agents. So AI agents can't have a bank account because you have to have KYC and AML. You have to be a person to do that. So they can have their own Bitcoin address, their own Bitcoin wallet, and they could do microtransactions, fractions of penny, back and forth at the speed of light 1,000 times if they wanted to. And so we're already seeing there was an AI agent that was programmed to go build a business, find names, business plans, find the domain names, and went and bought a domain name using Bitcoin over the Lightning Network. So we're already seeing
Truth Terminal or a different one.
I'm not sure which one it did that on.
Truth Terminal's crazy.
But so it's already happening, and so it seems like with the AI agents, they're going to need some form of payment to hire each other, pay them out, the cost of compute plus energy.
Not to derail though. So on Bitcoin, I am so nonplussed by the argument that this has to be a medium of exchange. So tell me if you think I'm just naive and I'm missing something. But to me, the thing that would cause Bitcoin to fail is to have a currency that can't be inflated. So if there was a currency that couldn't be inflated, I wouldn't even think twice about Bitcoin. I just about put my money in whatever that thing is. Bitcoin is that. So right now, in a world where your money is being inflated, you have to have somewhere to go where your money can't be inflated. So now the only catch with Bitcoin to me is that people love its volatility. I hate it. I want it to just be a static place. I can put my money and be like, cool, this is going to be worth the same in 10 years that it is today.
That's gold. You got that.
Gold also works. Yeah. But in a world where it becomes more and more virtual, I don't like when I think about a kid who grows up and they were, let's say, 9 2 years ago, for them, Bitcoin just exists. It's just a thing. People take it seriously. It's an option. Like they don't have any sense of like, oh, it was born and there was a time where people thought it was weird. They're just like, oh yeah, Bitcoin. It's like that.
Like my daughter thought everything was a touchscreen. She was go touch every computer.
Oh yeah, of course. So I think my thesis anyway with Bitcoin, people can think what they will, is that the world is going to be more virtual tomorrow than it is today. And one of the most important things to virtualize is money. I certainly don't want it to be a CBDC. Stablecoin helps a lot, but that's still, at least as imagined right now, going to be backed by a fiat currency. So that doesn't solve my problem of inflation. So having a inflation-resistant thing that I can self-custody, it solves that problem. So I've obviously heard people now starting to talk about, oh, this has failed because it's not a medium of exchange. That just doesn't even make my radar.
Yeah.
Gold can be, but
it can't.
Like I hold gold.
Gold can't be in the digital age, and gold requires centralization to get the velocity, which is why it failed. In
so why don't people complain about that? Because they're saying it's used in like electronics.
Yeah, no one's arguing that with gold. But back to the point. So if you think about Bitcoin and the attributes, and so in the monetary evolution, you go from a collectible. This is a cool rock, feather, seashell baseball card. But some collectibles, most don't, but some collectibles become a store of value. Some people put a lot of wealth in their baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever, right?
Art, sure.
And then some collectibles, if they have the right, store of values, if they have the right attributes, could become a medium of exchange, which would be portable, durable, divisible, recognizable, fungible, etc.
And do you accept that that's an important part of Bitcoin's future?
Well, I'll answer that by asking you a question. So if you imagine the future, you said there's 2 books that were written that tell us the future that are very clear. And one of them was 1984. And why is that one so scary, you said? It's an authoritarian state.
Surveillance.
So the government, if you read, Anatomy of the State or Bastiat's The Law, you understand the role of the government is to always grow and to always retain power. And so governments are going to try and do 2 things. Number 1, continue to inflate away the currency. And number 2, continue to take more power and more freedom away. That's the role of the state, of the government. And so in North Korea, you're not allowed to have money. Let me give you another example. So Bitcoin has lots of attributes. Permissionless. There's over 1 billion adults in the world right now today who are not allowed to use the global financial system because they don't have permission to join. 1 billion adults. There's 8 billion people. I'm talking 1 billion adults. So they don't have permission to join. So think about the mind share that the world has lost. If we brought 1 billion adults into the world to bring more solutions and solve more problems and more value, but they're out. They left a war-torn country. They don't have proper documentation. They or a 15-year-old kid that happened to be born in the wrong country, they're out. So think about that. They don't have permission in the current system of medium of exchange currency. It's also censorship resistant. It's also immutable. So, for example, immutable. Why is that important? Well, in India in 2016, they canceled all the big bills. And you had a month to bring them all in and claim them and show all the paperwork of how you earned the bills, or you lost them. But India is a high cash country, so a lot of people had this money saved and they lost it all. It wasn't immutable. Why censorship resistant? The lady that cuts my hair is from Afghanistan. She was there when she was a girl. When the Biden administration pulled out in 2022 and it was a disaster, the Taliban took it over. She's like, Mark, I just feel so bad. I know these ladies back in Afghanistan, they need so much help. I'd love to send them money if there was a way, but I can't because the Taliban took over the bank. So it's censorship resistant. So in this future world, I believe, to the point I think you believe, 1984, it wasn't supposed to be a playbook, right? An instruction manual, but it seems to be that way. And in North Korea and in Afghanistan, and the U.S. dodged a curveball that Europe is trying to launch a CBDC now. In that world that we're rapidly going into, we will probably need, people today need a censorship-resistant way to transmit value. And so the question that you would ask yourself is, do you think governments print more money or less money in the future? And do you think they become more authoritarian or less authoritarian in the future? Now, you mentioned earlier, what AI is doing and the rise of, or the divide between the rich and the poor, and potentially leading to some sort of mass civil unrest. I know Ray Dalio is super big on that topic. So in that, if that were to happen and we got more civil unrest, then what do governments do? Do they take more power, become more authoritarian? And if so, do we need a way to transact outside of the state?
Yeah, all strikes me as a very good idea. Now, I'm a much bigger believer in the wrench attack, I think, than a lot of people. If the government wants your Bitcoin, they're going to get your Bitcoin.
They won't, and here's why. So have you read the book Sovereign Individual?
I have read like the first 2 chapters.
And you gave
take
up.
it as a no.
And you gave up on it.
I wouldn't say that I gave up. It was interesting, but other things took its place, and I never went back to it.
So if you think about like the states, a state, the country, the government has a monopoly on violence, obviously, right? But like all things, there's trade-offs and there's returns, right? So like in 1933, when the government seized the gold, it was very easy for them to seize the gold because all the gold was in the bank. Right, so all the gold went into the bank. They gave you an IOU claim for the gold so we could speed up the velocity of money while they held the gold. So it was very easy for them to put a bank holiday in place. Banks were closed for a week. When they opened the banks back up, you were no longer able to get your gold. Now, if they had to ride out in 1930s across the plain to ranchers and farmers with guns, and they had to go house to house to house to house to house, and where's your gold? Go through this. Where's your treasure map? And they had to go dig it up. Would that have been realistic? The return on violence would have been way too low. Every one of those ranchers with guns would have fought back. The chance of them finding 1 or 2 gold coins, the return on violence would be too low to do that. But because it was in the bank, it was very easy to do. Well, trying to go door to door to door and try to recover people's hardware wallets and hang people by their toe and tickle them until they give up their private key, the return on violence is just way too low. It's just impractical for them ever to try to achieve something like that.
To cast a vote that the government won't do it is very different than to say that they can't do it. So my argument is simply anybody that's taken a lot of solace in that, I would say don't. If for whatever reason you're the one that they target and come after, they will get your Bitcoin.
So there's a couple things about that. So number one, they could say, hey, we'll kill you on site if you don't turn it in.
Yep.
So they did make gold illegal, right? So not only did we take your gold, if we catch you with gold, it's illegal. So they could certainly do that. I would say with that a couple of things. Like number one, when the government makes things illegal, they typically become bigger and more useful. So like the war on drugs since the 70s, drugs are a bigger problem today. Now, when the government tells you not to do drugs, it doesn't make you want to do drugs. But when they tell you you don't have a right to store your wealth in a way we can't steal and confiscate from you, it sort of makes you want to. Just like every time they talk about imposing new gun laws, what happens with gun sales? So number one, you have human psychology and motivation. Number two, with drugs have to be, they're physical items that have to be grown and cultivated and packaged and shipped and smuggled and distributed. Whereas Bitcoin is completely digital peer-to-peer and can't be traced or tracked. So how do they stop that? They can't even keep drugs out of a prison. So I think it's just impractical. I think what happens is technology moves faster than the state. So you have 3D gun schematics. Well, they can make those illegal. Well, now they're on the Bitcoin blockchain. and they're censorship resistant for all of humanity. How does the government do that? So when they try to, I think what happens when the government tries to move on technologies that are moving and advancing faster than they are, it makes the state look irrelevant and incompetent. But you've interviewed a lot of people with Bitcoin. My good friend Robert Breedlove, I know you've had Saylor on a couple times as well, and he calls Bitcoin digital energy. He has some really good metaphors. I mean, he's an amazing mind. I love the part where he told you, you said, but what about all these other cryptocurrencies? He says, how many chairs do you have? You're just sitting in one chair, right?
Yes, the meme.
Yeah. But when you think about it like that as digital energy, and then you think about like storing that energy for a long period of time, especially in today's day and age, where we're going into this AI age, there was this sort of DeepSeek moment that was April 27th, was it? Where all of a sudden DeepSeek was dropped into the world, and it sort of caused NVIDIA to crash. And it sort of made the whole world kind of step back and go, are we pricing assets properly? Because couldn't a bunch of wealth leave the NASDAQ and go to China? And if they need less NVIDIA chips, do we have NVIDIA priced right? And it sort of made everybody sort of look at everything differently. And I'm curious, through your talks and Bitcoin with Saylor and others, do you think it eventually reprices assets, like investment assets as we know them?
It's a good question. On a long enough timeline, I honestly don't know. That isn't the way that I think about Bitcoin. To me, I take a very simple approach, which is that you've got inflation. Inflation is the problem of the modern era, like the problem. The number of things that I think emanate from the fact that governments deficit spend and then print to not have to engage the voting public with their choices is deeply problematic. So to me, Bitcoin solves that incredible problem, and it solves it in a moment where, as it's being effectively repriced by the wild inflation of the dollar combined with the growing awareness and demand for Bitcoin, you get this incredible run up for people that are able to withstand the temporary volatility. So I look at it in that perspective. I ultimately want Bitcoin to become an incredibly boring asset. I want it to be a place where I can put my money, and I know that the amount of output I got from a unit of my time in the past holds that value. Because then, and this is a big part of my thesis, right now, the reason that the average American doesn't invest in the stock market, and if they do, they certainly don't invest very much, is because they don't understand it. It's just complicated enough that they're never going to understand it. And so I think a government has a moral obligation to give their citizens an opportunity to just save their money in a way where it's not going to go down in value. Once you do that, I think a lot of problems go away. Now people that are fiscally responsible, they're going to save their money. It's not going to be eaten by inflation. There's going to be a benefit for them to do that. So that's the thesis, the lens through which I look at Bitcoin. Now, whether it ends up gobbling up more and more of these assets, I don't see how it couldn't. For somebody like me who might otherwise consider rolling the dice on a piece of art, I would much rather be in certainly my future vision of Bitcoin, where it becomes far less risky. So people that are trying to build wealth right now are going to go for Bitcoin, but hopefully one day that's like a way more stable play. And so that's not where they're focused on. And that way we really begin to have assets that are low risk, and we have assets that are higher risk. And the people that want to accept the consequences of getting that wrong, they can go do it. I think people should be able to spend their money however they want. But I have not put a lot of thought into like how much do I think that this just keeps gobbling up the world, because I didn't buy it because I thought, oh my God, this is going to go up an insane amount of value. I bought it because I thought tomorrow will be more digital than today, and that you have to have an escape from inflation. You have to.
Yeah. You've interviewed over 600 high performers. Congratulations on that number, by the way. Generated over 1 billion views. And you've pulled yourself from scrounging on couch cushions to building $1 billion business, or exiting $1 billion business. You showed on Twitter or on X your top 10 favorite interviews of all time. You said they weren't ranked in any particular order, but I noticed that like 5 of those people were money guys, and 2 of those were like future tech guys. So I was going to ask you, if you had to distill everything you've learned into a single mind-blowing insight that my audience might be left thinking about for a few days, what would that be?
Nothing matters other than thinking from first principles. That
so
is the
formulate
most
your own hypothesis.
devastating. Yes, first principles is a little deeper than that. First principles is the world works on a set of rules. We'll call them the laws of physics, and everything
A priori
else
truth?
stacks on that. Yes, they are the axioms that we cannot disprove.
Right.
And once you understand that life is a big chain of cause and effect, that we can't go all the way back because we don't fully understand physics. But man, you can really think like an engineer, which is the right way. Even if you're playing a game of psychology, the human mind works in a certain way. It's complex, a lot of variables, but it works in a knowable way. And so if you focus obsessively on mapping that well, then you can get as close to having a crystal ball as you're ever going to get. And it's almost, the guests that I have really fall into two gigantic camps. There are people that are just worried about the laws of physics in their own mind. Like, here are the things that I'm up against, David Goggins. I figured out how to master my own mind. Cool. You've got the physics of your mind. And given that, you've been able to lead an extraordinary life because you understood how to deal with your own limitations, your cognitive biases, all of that. Then there are people that do external thing where they master money, they master business. It's the same game. You're trying to figure out, how does this thing actually work? How do I get my emotions out of the way? And how do I think from first principles? And I have a feeling, no matter how many people I interview, they're going to use different words, but they're all going to be people who did that thing either on a really granular subject. So take Annie Jacobs, I believe is her name, and she's walking you through the first principles of nuclear war and what it looks like and like why we have to avoid it and all that stuff. Again, just cause and effect. Eric Weinstein is literally walking you through the laws of physics. Michael Saylor, how Bitcoin is financial energy, and he's literally using the language of physics. Ray Dalio saying, I figured out how this game worked, and so I can point you 500 years backwards to explain it, and I can tell you, given these cycles, what it's going to look like moving forward. It's like all of the really just incredible banger guests are people that I'm like, oh, you know where you're trying to end up, and you're just thinking from first principles with an understanding that you can master a set of skills that allow you to do something in your own mind or in the real world that works better than the next person.
Yeah. And everyone should figure that out for themselves.
I mean, it's really universal, but you have to figure out how to get out of your own way with your own cognitive limitations, biases, distorted frame of reference. So it will be an N of one experiment, but you're seeking the truly universal.
Got it. All right. I think this might be my longest interview ever. So.
My apologies. Only because I kept taking you down.
No, it was good. It was really good. It was really good. So we'll end it with that, Tom.
Awesome.
Obviously, we'll link to your stuff down below. I'm sure everybody already knows where to find you.
I hope so. At Tom Bilyeu, wherever you go.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.